Okay, it's 2:05, so we are going to get started, and if anybody else trickles in, they can trickle in. My name is Abby Ulofoshio. I am the STEM Student Retention Program Manager. I know some of you, and I don't know some of you, so thank you for coming. And this is Jeremiah Roland, and he is the Director of the Learning Support Center. You'll hear from him as well. So we are here to tell you about personal statements. I also just want to acknowledge that this is being recorded. None of you are being recorded, maybe just the back of your head, but this presentation will be recorded and it will be put online. So if you want to view it later, I will send out the link and you will be able to access all of that information. So don't feel like you have to write a whole bunch of things down. So we can get started. Today we are going to briefly review some application deadlines. I figure that most of you are here because you are planning to apply to schools. So just really briefly going over those deadlines. And then we are going to learn what a personal statement is and why it's important. And we are going to review the common misconceptions about personal statements and why those misconceptions are false. And then we are going to discover what makes a strong personal statement, and Jeremiah will help us really dive into the writing process, how you do revisions, and all of that good stuff. And then we will review a personal statement example. We'll share some resources with you. We'll do a reflection, and then there will be time for questions if you have questions that you want to ask to the whole group, or we will stick around individually also so that you can ask questions that are just personally for us, so we can talk one-on-one afterwards if you have any questions about your personal statements. So these are just some application deadlines that are coming up for either first-year students or transfer applications. I'm not going to read through all of them, but you can just look through them for a minute. You can take a picture if you want. Most of the first-year applications are due a lot earlier. Some of them have already passed, and some of them are this weekend. But there's a few that are also later in January or even in March. And then the transfer applications, I know the big one is UW Seattle, is going to be on February 15th. And the rest are March or later. Some of them even take applications through August. I wouldn't wait that long, but just know that some of them are on a rolling basis. Does anyone need this slide to take a picture or anything any longer? Okay. So, what is a personal statement and why is it important? So I'm sure many of you probably know what a personal statement is to some extent, and that's why you're here. But the personal statement is part of your application to your college or university. Generally, sometimes they're also used for jobs. You have to write one. So if you're thinking I'll never have to do this again, sometimes you do if you're applying to a job. So it's a good skill to know how to do in general. And they're usually an essay, a paper that helps them know who you are and why they should accept you to their program. So the personal statement is your chance to show the university why they should accept you. It's your chance to be more than just the numbers, more than your GPA, more than your test scores, to show them who you are as a person, what your personality is, and why you yourself are really valuable to their program. And it also distinguishes you from other applicants. So there could be multiple applicants that have a 3.5 or a 3.3 or a 4.0 that have done some sort of extracurricular activity, and those things are all awesome, but on paper, it can be hard to differentiate those applicants. How do you choose between them if you have a certain number of spots in a program? So the personal statement is a way for colleges to really show who they want to pick and for you to distinguish yourself, to set yourself apart, to show, like I said, your personality, maybe your history, your story, something that makes you unique and that the program would benefit you and that you would also be a benefit to their school. It's also your opportunity to really affirm your goals, your priorities, and why you want to be a part of that program. So you can share with them what your dreams are, what your goals are, why this is the program for you, and why they should choose you. And lastly, it demonstrates your writing ability. So it's a chance for you to show that you know your grammar, your punctuation, you know how to put sentences together, you know how to coherently construct a paper with multiple paragraphs in a way that is sequential and organized, and organize all of your thoughts so that they can understand it and might also be really enjoyable for them to read and want to get to know you better. That would be the goal at the end of your personal statement. So, a very important piece of your application for sure. But there's a lot of common misconceptions about personal statements and also about writing in general in STEM. So I wanted to add a few here that are general misconceptions for writing in STEM. First misconception, the definition of it is a view or opinion that is incorrect because based on faulty thinking or understanding. So your misconception is something that you may think, but it's actually false, and it's not true for some reason. So the first one is that STEM students are not good at writing. I can't tell you how many times I've heard a STEM student say, I'm really bad at writing. Writing just isn't my strength. I'm not good at it. I don't want to do it. I hear that all the time. And that's not true. It might not be your favorite area, and you might be right in that it might not be your strongest area, but you can definitely be a good writer. You can write things that are valuable and beautiful, and that doesn't change just because you are a STEM student and because you might like numbers better or work with electronics or robots or anything else. Some people think that writing is not an important skill for STEM students to have, which is also just not true. You will use writing in so many parts of your life. This goes with the second one as well, that the misconception, I will not use writing in my work in STEM. So a lot of people who might be engineers or even in environmental science and computer science, you think, where will I ever use writing? Well, you may use writing to get a cover letter to get a job. You might use writing to do a grant proposal in your job. You might use writing in a report or in just a paper explaining what you did. So writing is all over the place in the projects that you do and in your jobs in STEM. It doesn't end when you leave school, which I know is unfortunate in some ways, but it's an important skill to have and to continue to build on and not just bypass. So the specific misconceptions for personal statements are, one of them is that a personal statement is merely a description of educational and work experiences. So some people think, I just have to put my whole resume in here, I have to put my whole CV, I'm just listing off every accomplishment that I have, everything I've ever done. That's what my personal statement is. That is also not true, not the best way to go about it. We'll learn a bit more about how to write the good personal statement, how to write a really strong personal statement, but know that it is more than your resume, more than your CV. They want to know you, your personality, what sets you apart. Next, the misconception that I need to show the reviewers everything I know about my intended field. Well, if they wanted to know everything about your intended field, they would go read papers on the intended field. They wouldn't want to know about you, but your personal statement is about you. So you want to tell them something that is unique, something specific to you, something, again, that sets you apart, that really shows them who you are as a person, maybe even beyond what you do academically and professionally. If they wanted to know all about the intended field, that might be a different type of prompt, or that may be an essay once you get into your program. And next, a misconception that writing about a major life event is best. Some people think, well, I have to have had a really traumatic event, or I should write about the biggest thing that's ever happened to me. Because this thing happened, I always have to write about it in every paper. Also not true, sometimes the little things are just as important. So you could choose to do that, that's not bad, but that doesn't mean that you have to write about every big event that's ever happened in your life in your personal statement. The opposite of that is also true, that if you do write about that bigger traumatic event, that doesn't make you sound like you're complaining. That doesn't make you sound like you are just getting the sympathy votes. That thing was important to you and it was valuable. And so you should write about that experience if you feel like that is the best thing that you can share with them. And you can write about that in a way that is eloquent, and that's what you want them to know about you. So it may or may not be, you can choose. So all of those misconceptions, there's a lot of them. There may be more, but these things are false. And so we can learn more about the personal statement, how to write it, what makes a really strong personal statement from Jeremiah.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jeremiah Roland. I'm both math faculty on campus and I'm director of the Learning Support Center. I'm going to share with you a little bit about what makes a strong personal statement. So as Abby was sharing, the personal statement, it shows the university why they want you and why this school and program is a strong fit for you at this moment. You're really trying to show how what you've been through, where you're headed, how that's putting you right now in the perfect place to be joining this university. You want to get that university excited about bringing you in, that your personality, the work that you've done, the education that you've done, where you are in your headspace about life and learning, and what events you've been through, why that shaped you into being a strong student that will come into that program, not only be successful in that program, but they can feel as they read your personal statement that you'll have something that you're contributing to that program and to your cohort as you enter that program. So you really want to have a chance to kind of stand out. It tells a story of you and your path to applying to this university. So again, they're not just looking for all the things that you've done. You certainly can to talk about some of the experiences you've been through and some of the work that you've done in your school, but you're really trying to build this story that lets them get to know you and how you've learned and reacted and grown from the experiences that you've been through. I've read personal statements where someone shares that big traumatic event that's happened in their life, but then they don't really tie it into what growth came from that, how that event has shaped them to be a strong candidate for that program. It was just something bad happened, but then it was just in their paper and it didn't really link. So if you're going to introduce events in your paper, make sure that they're really part of that story arc that you're trying to build for the reader so that they get hooked with your experience, can see your growth from those experiences and why they've kind of tempered you to be a strong student and what you'll be bringing in because of that. Not everybody has that big, strong story. Maybe it's or big traumatic or big event in their life. It could be some smaller events or just even some chance happenings in your undergrad, your 2 years here. Maybe you had a chance to do some undergrad research here, and that really was very impactful and turned you on to some new ideas about what you want to study. That could be something that you start to build on. Maybe that changed you, and maybe that started to change the trajectory of your education. Maybe that's when your grades started to pick up as you started to engage in something that really resonated with you. So you can start to build that story. The build your story part is difficult for a lot of students. Not all of us come around with kind of a narrative of where we are. Some people do, but a lot of people, they haven't had that self-reflection and tried to think out those thoughts about what is a primary story that I can tell about myself, about why I'm here right now. My recommendation to you, if you're having trouble kind of taking a look at where you are right now, start having some conversations with other people. Start trying to talk to them about why this program is right for you right now. And maybe they'll ask you some questions and you'll start to get a better idea of how to verbalize where you are right now and start to have that story shape. I've done that for a lot of students actually in the Learning Support Center. Students will come in and they've got a lot of ideas for their personal statement that are kind of floating around, but maybe I'm not hearing what's making them unique. And I'll just start to ask them questions, and they'll start bringing in personal events in their life. They'll talk about maybe they're going into nursing because they had a really impactful experience with a nurse that helped them out, and they want to now give back to their community because of this event. And that was left out of their personal statement, but after some conversation, those little bits about their story and who they are start to come. So if you have someone in your life that you think can ask some probing questions and get you to think about yourself in kind of a new light, that could be part of your writing process. I also extend myself. You're always welcome to come by and just kind of introduce yourself to me over in the Learning Support Center, and we can have those types of conversations too. It goes deeply on a couple focused ideas and themes, and it doesn't try to get too broad. You're not telling the story of who you were as a kindergartner and how you changed through elementary school and high school and now and all these other things. You really want to try to to deepen kind of a shorter period of what's happening with you. More recent events are generally a little bit more important than things that were in the back or kind of further back. Doesn't mean that things that happened a while ago aren't important, but they really want, or the universities want to see where you are now, and they want to really have some depth showing up. When you start getting and including lots of information, I've seen people include their elementary school teachers' names and what their schedule was. I see some people reaching for some pretty distant kind of little tidbits to throw in there, and that's not really enriching what the reader of the personal statement is looking for. Maybe if you're doing some personal writing, those little tidbits are important. If you're writing shorter fiction, maybe some names and things are important because they're building something. But in a personal statement, you really want to stick to your story and make it compact. It avoids cliches and phrases that don't contribute to getting to know you. So long introductory phrases that are just kind of cliched, things like, ever since I can remember, I've wanted to do this. That's a whole lot of words that don't really reveal anything to the reader about you. So when you start to see those kind of phrases, try to, instead of saying like, ever since I can remember, maybe take a moment and think, wait, where did this desire come from? Instead of just saying, ever since I can remember, maybe you can start to build your story of how that developed. And avoiding cliches and phrases is also something difficult sometimes to see in our own writing if you haven't practiced it. So you can give it to a trusted person to take a look at, or you can give it to a writing assistant to get feedback. And we'll talk about revision process later. But you can say, I'm worried maybe I'm using some cliches or vague language in my draft. Maybe you can help me highlight those. And then that's a part of the revision process. And we'll talk more about that a little bit here. All right, and it's compelling and makes the reader want to get to know you more. So how does that look like? Well, again, it's not just a list of your accomplishments. It's not just a list of the classes it isn't a list of the classes that you've done and the projects you've been part of. You're making sure that you're showing up in there. So that's growth and reaction and how you kind of came to be where you are. The more that you kind of get to be aware of yourself, you'll be able to include that in your personal statement, and the more unique it will become. All of you have very unique paths to where you are now, but on paper, you might look very similar as STEM students. You're all at Edmonds College. You're all taking similar classes. Maybe you're all even doing kind of similarly well. So it's hard for the university to be like, what makes you separate? But the more that you think about yourself and kind of bring yourself into there, and that's not the academics, that's how you're reacting, and I'm using the word reacting, but I mean it's kind of the spirit of how you're approaching school and what you're learning and what's energizing you. The more you can get some of those elements coming in, the more you'll start to differentiate yourself from other applicants. All right, writing process and revision. So firstly, read the prompt and understand what's being asked. Essay prompts and requirements vary by school and program. Be sure to answer the prompt correctly. So before you start running to a draft, some essay prompts are fairly complex, and some provide some strongly suggested structure with which you should approach the personal statement. Make sure you're understanding just what the prompt is asking you. And if you're not sure at all, maybe seek some feedback from some trusted people. Bounce some ideas off them, see if they think you're heading in the right direction. Because you really don't want to answer the prompt incorrectly, because then you're just over already. So make sure that you're responding to the prompt fully and you're not leaving any pieces out. Sometimes there's kind of more complex sentence structure within the prompts that take a little unpacking to make sure that you're including all aspects of that prompt. So some are simple, but some get a little bit deeper. And then brainstorm and start developing your story. And we talked about this, of why this program in school is the right fit for you and right now. That's where some confidence can start to show up. Not arrogance, but confidence. There's ways to really show how everything you've been through, how your education has prepared you, and that you're kind of coming into that program really excited, and that you're going to be successful to complete that program. And you do that not so much by saying, I'm going to be successful in this program. You show them what successes you've been through and how you're ready to tackle it. Plan to seek feedback on your writing and expect to make lots of substantial revisions and rewrites. Some people get pretty close to what they want on their first attempt. Maybe they've already kind of worked some thoughts out, but I would say the vast majority of people, when they start to work on personal statements, their first draft looks very different from how their complete final draft is. After they've sought feedback and they've worked on revisions, sometimes parts of their draft that were very important to them early on end up not even being part of that final draft. So maybe you start to see that a story that you included isn't such a key piece to the story that you want to share with the reviewers. Maybe you suddenly found you had another transformative experience that shaped you in a different way and you want to include it. So I really urge you to know when your due dates are for these. Start well before that so you can create a draft, and then as needed, you can really get in there and change it around as needed. And don't wait till the last minute. Personal statements take time. So really give yourself a lot of time so you can get into that personal statement, not feel rushed on it. You want to be turning in a work that is the very best representation of you. And if you shortcut it, your reader's going to know. Even if it's grammatically correct and the sentences are right, if it doesn't look like there's some time that's been put in, that reader will feel like you're wasting their time because they have a lot of applications to get through and they want to feel like you respected their time and really made an effort at the personal statement. And then be sure your personal statement represents you well, is grammatically correct, clearly and thoughtfully written, and avoid statements or unneeded information that don't add to your statement, and that's the idea of don't include a lot of unnecessary information. Make sure that you stay within the word limit. I've worked with students who have tripled the word limit. It'll say 400 word count. And I'll sit down with a student and they have 1,200 words. It's far too long for what was required. And it shows the university that you don't follow directions. You either don't read them or you don't follow them. And that's not going to be a good impression at all. And depending on how that university's policy is, they might not consider you. But it's not the impression that you want to make. So really respect that word limit. And if you find yourself going over that word limit, again, get in there, see where those cliches are in your draft, see where there's unnecessary language, maybe where you've repeated yourself some, and see how you can really compact it. And that's where working with a tutor can help you. You might say, hey, I've got this draft, it's 600 words, I need to meet 400. Can you give me some feedback on maybe where there's some condensing that I can do in my writing? And again, that captures your voice and your uniqueness. All right, so I've got my wife's personal statement up here. So Recently, my wife applied for a doctorate program for occupational therapy, and she went through the process of writing a personal statement. And she hadn't had to do that for her undergraduate, and so she went through that process of trying to learn how to write about herself and how to really bring out a story of why she was appropriate for an occupational therapy program. And she reached out to some tutoring, and I'll tell you about that in a few minutes about what that looks like. And she reached out to some other resources as well. But I'll pull this up here. I'm not going to go through the whole draft right here, but we'll be making this available. And what she ended up in the end doing was she had very limited experience in anything related to occupational therapy, or even very little experience with being hands-on with individuals. She was coming from a biochemistry undergraduate where she had a lot of experience in working in labs and very much away from people. And so she stitched together her experience of making a transition where she transitioned to being a fitness coach, where she got more experience at working on one-on-one with people. Then she explained in her draft how there was some lack of ethics within the field of personal training and things like that. And then she helped build a transition to where she worked at an autism clinic for young people on the autism spectrum, and eventually leading to wanting to apply for occupational therapy. When she first sat down and did this draft, it was a lot more about her undergrad education. It was a lot more about what she had done in biochemistry in the field and labs and things, and that's all not relevant to occupational therapy. So she really needed to push away from what had been a core piece of her identity for a very long time, and then start to live closer to now where that transition for her was to occupational therapy. And so it looked, her first draft, which I don't have with me here, looked very different from her final draft. To get that, for her to really start to see those, the service she used was e-tutoring. And e-tutoring is a consortium of Northwest colleges and universities that Edmonds is part of. And all those schools have pooled together tutors to work online. And you can access that through the Learning Support Center's website. What you do is you upload a draft of your personal statement along with a description of the personal statement. And then one of the personal statement tutors will get back to you within 24 to 48 hours with critical feedback, both as in-text comments on your draft and some endnotes about where you can go. You can submit to e-tutoring up to 3 times. And so after each submission, you'll want to really take some thought about how you want to make those revisions, because you want to have as much growth as you can from the first draft you have to your final draft. But my wife did that. She submitted 3 times, and she was still so nervous about applying to grad school. Then she went to an outside paid service with a person that specialized in applications for occupational therapy school. And I share that story because everybody's trying to write the best personal statement that they can. Just getting a little bit of feedback, it might help you stand out from a couple people that haven't put that much effort into, but you really want to think about that feedback process, see how you can work to develop this essay, and I just want to knock home what an important part of the application process it is. All right. In addition, I'm over in the Learning Support Center, and easy to find. That's in Mukilteo Hall, room 113. And you can always either shoot me an email at jeremiah.roland@edmonds.edu, or you can just drop into the Learning Support Center during our open hours and say, hey, I'm thinking about my personal statement. I have a draft. Can you speak with me about it? And I'm always happy to meet with students and talk personal statements. I find it really energizing and fun to do, so I do extend myself that way. And then we have some web resources as well. Purdue University's online writing lab has a whole lot of information that you can dig into a little bit deeper. A lot of the things that I shared today came from Purdue's writing lab, but they have examples of successful personal statements that you can get into. They have advice from actual admission representatives, so people that have read through essays many time about what works and what doesn't work, and then some tips on personal statement, top 10 rules and pitfalls. But I encourage you to kind of reach out to or look at this resource, talk with me, talk with anyone that's important in your life that maybe has gone through the personal statement process themselves, just so you can collect as much information about this aspect of your application so that you can go into writing it as prepared as possible. Thank you. Thank you.
A couple more things for you here. And here's the slide with all of Jeremiah's information and the Learning Support Center information. If you want to write any of that down really quickly.
And I'll share since we're here a little bit about these services. So we're located over in Mukiltee Hall 113. We're the school's drop-in tutoring resource, and we tutor most everything on campus here. We also have live tutoring online through Zoom. You can get access through that on our website. If you want to get help specifically, not just with writing, but with sentence level grammar issues that you have going on, we have some drop-in grammar help over there. We also have that e-tutoring that I talked about, which is a consortium of tutors that you can submit your work to and get feedback on.
A really great resource, I think, is underutilized, so if you want to use it, feel free. They are there to help you, so definitely do that as you're writing your personal statement. And then some other resources, you see the Mukiltee 113, Jeremiah Roland, and your office is 113 as well, which I forgot to put there, so it should be there. And then the MESA Student Center also has resources for tutoring. I don't know that everyone in there would be comfortable reading personal statements, but you can always ask. And then the STEM Study Room also has tutors. I, again, don't know if all the tutors would be comfortable reading personal statements, but you could ask. And I love reading personal statements, so you can always come to me, and I'm happy to read your personal statement and give you feedback as well. So a few reflection questions for you that you can take a few minutes, you can answer in your head, you can write them down. They're not for us, they're for you, so you don't have to give us your pieces of paper or anything. But first, just think about what misconceptions do you hold about writing in general or about personal statements specifically. So do you have any ideas going into a personal statement about what it should look like, about your writing abilities? Is there anything that you are believing about it, anything that might be a misconception? So you can write about that one, and then there's a couple other ones here as well. I'll just read you all of them and then give you a bit of time to write and respond. So the second one is to think about the prompt for your top college or colleges. I recognize that you might not know it off the top of your head, so you can look it up if you need to, if you haven't already started. And think about how can you use what you learned today to write a strong personal statement. And then lastly, what do you need in order to write the best personal statement possible? So for some of you, you might just need to start. Some of you might be brainstorming, and you might just need to start writing and get out of your head. Some of you might need an outline. You might need to do a little bit of brainstorming about what stories do you have? What events in your life do you want to include in that personal statement? Some of you might be at a stage where you need feedback, where you're almost done with your first draft, but you haven't gotten any feedback yet. So you might need feedback. So just think about what you need in order to write the best personal statement possible. So I'll give you a few minutes to respond.